I think mail-in voting is going to rig the election. I really do.
Are you suggesting that you might not accept the results of the election?
I have to see.
Can you give a direct answer? You will accept the election?
I have to see. Look, I have to see. No, I'm not going to just say yes. I'm not going to say no, and I didn't last time either.
The Biden campaign responded to that with this statement. The American people will decide this election, and the United States government is perfectly capable of escorting trespassers out of the White House. In fact, this afternoon, Nancy Pelosi, the speaker, said that she would, if needed, fumigate the office. So you can see tensions getting ratcheted up on Capitol Hill. And now, we are 106 days before Election Day. Biden continues to hold a huge lead over the president, at least via polling. In fact, a new one conducted by ABC News and the Washington Post shows the former VP, he's up by 15 points. That's one of a handful of recent polls showing Biden leading by double digits over Trump. Now, the only one in single digits is from Fox News, and even that has Biden with an 8-point margin. And by the way, the president, he called that one a fake poll and fake news. And when you look at the biggest issues facing Americans, Biden, he's looking strong. Trump, he has a 2-point lead in the economy. Some even have that dead even. But Biden, he's more trusted to handle crime, COVID, race relations, and just about every other issue. As you can see, the spreads all large. I want to bring in our guest, Paul Steinhauser. He's a national political reporter based in New Hampshire. He's also former political editor of CNN. And Paul, you know, a lot of this past his prologue we saw from 2016 before the election. Then candidate Trump was already questioning the reliability of not only the polls, but even the election, saying that it was fake and that it was rigged and all the rest. How big of a margin will it matter that it doesn't matter what he says? Do people have an idea right now that if, you know, come election night, the margin's 5 points plus, you know, the president can protest all he wants, but it won't really change a thing?
Well, I think you make a good point that, yes, the larger the margin, if Joe Biden is the winner, then, yeah, the less that the president will be able to protest. That's pretty clear. And if polls, and we got a long way to go, Richard, 3.5 months, but if the polls hold up, then we could be heading towards a large electoral college victory for Joe Biden, just like Donald Trump had a large electoral college victory over Hillary Clinton, even though he lost the popular vote by about 2%. But yeah, he did this in 2016. In fact, Richard, remember, even after he won, he still said the election was rigged. He said that was the reason he lost the popular vote.
You know, listen, in New York, we finally got the returns on some of the primary races, even though the margins were huge, 30-point swings in some. To me, I think Vanity Fair had it, she says it foreshadowed a November cluster F, and you could figure out the rest of it. How good a chance is it we're not going to know on election night who the winner is? And moreover, idle time in devil's hands. I mean, how much of a fiasco that could cause in the aftermath.
And that's a great point. I covered the 2020 campaign for Fox News, among others, and I wrote the same thing. Not just New York. You look at a host of other states in this primary process, and we're getting delayed results. Why? Because there's such a surge of absentee voting by mail. And that takes a while to count. So I think what you're seeing in the primaries is just an appetizer of things to come. If this is the close election on November 3rd, we may not know for maybe up to a week who the winner is. And boy, that's a recipe for disaster, because the last time we were in this situation, you got to go back, I guess, to 2004 when we didn't know that John Kerry had lost to George Bush for a day, and go back to 2000 and it took a couple of weeks. We're in a very different kind of climate right now. And you could see this president raising holy, you know what, if we don't have the results and if things are not going his way, and it may take a couple days. That's just a bad scenario, isn't it, Richard?
No, my gosh. Now, Paul, you know how to read polls, and sometimes we're guilty in this business of overreading or reading too much into them, but we're now from just the generic voter to the likely voter at this point, and the trend lines are going bad to worse for the president in every single imaginable category and demographic. And moreover, I don't see any numbers, economic, COVID, you name it. I don't see any trend lines pointing to being in a better position come November than he is now in late July. I mean, I got to imagine the Republican Party's petrified, down-ticket some of the consequences if today were the election.
Yeah, Senate Republicans, especially right now, they're fighting to keep the chamber. They have a 53-47 majority, but they're worried about that top of the ticket and being dragged down by the president. You're right, though. Right now, the polls, we're 3.5 months out, and the polls mostly are still doing registered voter models. Soon, in the next month or so, they're going to move to that narrower likely voter model. You will see things tighten up. In fact, you mentioned at the top of this segment that ABC News Washington Post poll, which among registered voters showed Biden up 15, among likely voters up 10. So still largely, but not as large. The numbers will tighten a little bit, but because Biden's leads are so big, he will still have the advantage when we move to that likely voter model. One other thing, and you hit it on the head, I think even more important than the horse race numbers are the president's numbers on coronavirus, and they're really tanking. And even more importantly, his wheelhouse has been the economy. As you pointed out, he's pretty much tied with Joe Biden now on the economy. That's a trouble point, a real troubling sign for this president.
And again, the states being most impacted now, but largely red and purple states here. So even if the president wanted to define this as a red and blue, he'd have a problem. Now, Paul, to me, I know some people close to President Trump say, hey, listen, just give us a chance to define Biden. You'll see this thing tighten up a little bit. He's been trying, has the president, and it hasn't really stuck. And COVID, in a bizarre way, has helped Biden because he hasn't had to go out and campaign. Plus, it's the president with the record that he's got to defend, not running as the outsider. Give me the rationale why Biden would want to or need to go out and campaign. I mean, he's even shut down basically the Democratic convention. I don't know how many of us are even going to go.
Yeah, I'll be one of the few, I think, there for Fox News. There's not going to be a lot of reporters. There's not going to be a lot of people there, just a couple of people from the Biden campaign and from the Democratic National Committee. But no, you nailed it right there. Why change? Why fix something if it's not broken? What Joe Biden is doing right now, traveling either in Delaware or maybe to Pennsylvania once or twice a week at the most, small scale events, usually a speech or a very small event. That's working right now. The president, he's letting the president be his own enemy, his worst enemy, and that is working right now. So I don't see why Joe Biden would want to change anything. You're absolutely right. This president, his campaign, and allied groups like the super PACs backing Mr. Trump are trying to define Joe Biden, trying to bring him down. It is not working right now. They're calling him a socialist. They say if he's elected, Bernie Sanders and AOC will rule the roost. They say he wants to get rid of the suburbs. He wants to defund the police. None of that is obviously true. It's not sticking. Why? As you mentioned, he is the incumbent right now. And that's the big difference from 4 years ago when he was the outsider and the disruptor. President Trump is the incumbent now. This election, as of now, is about him and his record, especially on coronavirus and the economy, Richard.
Final thing, Paul, late September, do you predict that Republicans electeds, those running in November, they're going to still be shoulder to shoulder with this president? Or do you think, especially with a good 11 to 12 Republicans fighting for their political lives in the Senate, you're going to see more than a few break ranks with Trump?
And you've already seen a little of that. It's like Susan Collins in Maine and a few of the others, Cory Gardner in Colorado, who are facing really challenging reelects, starting to distance themselves from the president. Yeah, I think they're going to have to if this trend line continues. But it may be too late by then for them. They've already kind of made their bed. They're laying in it, and it's going to be tough in that last month and a half to turn things around. And also, remember, Richard, we talk about Election Day on November 3rd. And especially this year in particular, because so many people are going to be voting by mail and absentee, the election is really going to start in late September when early voting and those absentee ballots can start coming in.
Great point. Paul, I appreciate the time as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Up next, first cruise ships, then nursing homes, now college campuses. Well, we asked the question whether or not they could become the next super spreaders when the kids report back to school. After the break, the education reporter for the Washington Post, she'll join us to discuss.